we can use those kind of experiences to increase our service delivery. So, Kolani, if I could start with you, what did you learn as a municipality through COVID, and what can we take forward that you will continue with after COVID?
Yeah. Thanks, Gerald. I think for us, the starting point is that as much as everybody was talking about the fourth industrial revolution, COVID has actually brought it right at our front doorstep, and there is no escaping it. There is a need for us to up the ante in terms of our, using technologies, ensuring that indeed we modernize the workplace. We can't continue with the old norm, and that is one of the things that we've experienced. For instance, in the municipality, we've been able to hold about 82 cases virtually. We've had 82 disciplinary hearings that we're able to hold virtually. And all we simply did was to say, you know what, as much as labor would say that they don't have connectivity, we provide connectivity as the municipality. And I think that for us has actually assisted to a greater extent. It makes sure that our labor relations processes are a bit more seamless, because now once we have people in a particular setup, we are able to provide everything for them, and then they're able to do the work from that particular point. But also, COVID has shown us that perhaps we are not focusing on the real things as municipalities. We put so much effort, we put so much resources on some things that are actually not critical to the delivery of our service delivery objectives. So we need to rethink, we need to reshape our processes. If, for instance, in the value chain of ensuring that we're able to provide a service to a community, and that value chain starts with a call center agent that must be there to receive a call in order for that call to be logged onto the system and reach a particular depot, and a job card to be generated for a team to go to a specific area in Tembisa and fix a sewer blockage. That particular value chain, COVID has taught us that if there is anything that is important, is to ensure that the system itself is checked up. You make sure that you are able to provide an appropriate process in order for the community to be able to firstly log on their particular requirements to the institution, but also give feedback to the communities. COVID has taught us as a municipality that there is a greater need to put emphasis on how to best serve communities. I think we've been concentrating too much on how to serve ourselves. We've been inward looking as municipalities to ensure that we provide a perfect workplace. We want to be the employers of choice, want to provide employee value proposition. COVID said, no. We must streamline our processes. We must look at what is the actual purpose that you are there as a municipality and put more resources into delivering on that particular purpose. And we are going from that particular premise. We are starting to rethink even how remuneration must be dealt with in the municipality, how conditions of service must be aligned, how working arrangements must be from shift systems and everything. So there is a huge, rethink. There is a huge process re-engineering so that we can be in a position to deliver quality services to communities that are battered more than ourselves by this particular pandemic. Thank
you, Kolani. I think that was quite a mouthful, a comprehensive response to what we can benefit from and where we need to put our emphasis. Nozibo, from your side?
From my side, Gerard, COVID has taught me as an individual and also the municipality that we've always had the technology. We've always had the smartphones, we've had the laptops, we've had the different meeting group platforms, your Teams, your Zooms, but we haven't been optimally utilizing them. So COVID has forced us to utilize the technology which has always been there to use it up to its maximum capacity. And we found that with going virtually, we've saved a lot on cost as we are not physically traveling to our meetings. We've also, because previously we were printing agendas, which we are now sending electronically. So it saved us a lot of cost. It saved us a lot of time as well, instead of, of going physically to the next meeting. It has made us to be flexible in terms of changing agenda items around as well, because people are in a specific venue. So it's easy for you to say, okay, let me change your agenda time slot with the next person. Whereas it would have been difficult in the past because you had people waiting there physically to come into the meeting. But also, COVID has taught us that it's put a great deal of responsibility with managers, that they need to devise monitoring tools to ensure that the work is being undertaken. Working virtually needs a person to be self-disciplined. And we also need to encourage employees as well to learn how to disengage, the work-life balance, because when you're working from home, you don't have a starting time and also a knock-off time. So we need to encourage that within our employees.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for that. I think that's also a point well made in terms of knowing when your work starts and when your home starts. Unfortunately, if you're in the same environment, you could sacrifice your family completely in a situation of working from home as well. Humotso,
Yeah, thanks very much. I think moving to the new normal will not come cheaply to the municipalities. Obviously, municipalities will have to dig deep in terms of providing resources to the workforce. Like the municipality I come from, it's a very rural municipality, and that will be a huge challenge. But again, I think what we have learned out of this particular experience is that there should be a large training of employees, and also the employing employees on degree based should come to an end. We should be dealing in employing hiring employees with skills, because now times have changed. Gone are the days where you come up with your degree and you get put into the system. So I think in a way the experience also, it accelerated the fourth industrial revolution as well.
thank you for that. Melissa, I'm going to sabotage you a bit, if you don't mind, in terms of a last question, which I think is a pertinent question. We've got plenty of employees at home still with comorbidities that have been paid for possibly for this whole duration, whilst not necessarily working, and the employer could practically also not accommodate them with special arrangements. So what is your take? What are especially when it's critical positions, what are the options left? Is it continuation of payment, or what are the legal options available to municipalities to consider in this time? Because we're also responsible towards the public and our ratepayers. Thank you.
Thanks for that question. It's very interesting. So my advice is for the municipality to familiarize itself with the recommended or recognized list of comorbidities. Then it should consult with its workforce on those employees who are alleged to have those comorbidities and get those employees to seek medical advice. So get it supported by a medical practitioner who would give a report to say this particular individual has got this particular comorbidity, this is how it is managed, the person is taking medication to manage it. In that medical practitioner's assessment, they do not believe that the particular employee should continue with the previous position that they had previously. Then the municipality should consult with the particular individual to find out what they would be comfortable with in terms of how can the municipality accommodate that particular individual in order to retain the skill and also to ensure that that employee can continue working and have a livelihood. Now, there's going to be certain instances where accommodation just unfortunately cannot be made. Some positions cannot be tailored to have working remotely from home. Potentially, there might not be other vacancies within the municipality for that employee to be placed where they wouldn't necessarily be public facing. And in those circumstances, it is possible to consider temporary incapacity for medical illness. Then the municipality would follow an incapacity procedure. And then for a certain period of time, it could potentially place that employee on medical leave. If sick leave is still owing to the particular employee, we would advise that they allow that employee to exhaust their sick leave or any other leave entitlements that are due and owing to them. And then also to consider the benefits that are potentially applicable to that particular employee in terms of the unemployment insurance fund. So there are long-term medical illness benefits that are applicable in terms of the UIF. And then eventually, once the pandemic has ceased and the increased risk is no longer posing a threat to that particular employee, the municipality can then consider bringing that employee back in to the workforce. So those are the kinds of considerations from an employment law perspective that municipalities can take in terms of employees that present with comorbidities. I think the most important point is to verify that that particular employee does indeed have a comorbidity that is recognized by the World Health Organization. And then at most, municipalities should try their very best to accommodate that particular individual. And only in circumstances when there's no possibility of accommodating that individual should it consider temporary incapacity. And that should be considered as a last resort, in my view. Hope that answers your question.
Yeah, no, thank you so much for that. I think just on your first presentation, possibly a last question, because I see our time is up. But I just wanted to say, when you start monitoring the employees at home, what are your obligations as an employer before you start monitoring the employee at home? So if you could just, I know you did touch on it, but if you could just emphasize possibly again, so it's nobody surprised at the end of the day that they have been monitored and suddenly being dismissed working from home. Thank you.
So at the very least, the most important point of departure for an employer if they want to monitor employees' activity online is to ensure that they get prior written consent. So employees should be made aware, either through their employment contract and preferably together with a social media policy or an online policy, that their communication is not going to be private, especially during working hours, especially across company-provided or municipality-provided networks, and ensure that when you intercept, it's for a proper purpose. It's for a purpose of ensuring that the business is continuing, that employees remain productive. It's to investigate the establishment of facts. It shouldn't be an interception of employees' private Gmail accounts or their private WhatsApp messages. There are parameters in which an employer should operate when it decides to intercept. But yeah, the take-home point is always make sure that you have prior written consent, either an employment contract or otherwise, before intercepting. Because if you do it without that prior written consent, then it's potentially going to be unlawful and in contravention of RICA, and also an infringement of that particular employee's right to privacy.
And can I also just personally thank you for your participation? These kind of experiences where the private sector also assists us as local government, we work together. We really want to appreciate your time. And also, I would really like to appreciate the time of my colleagues in coming to share your experiences. Kolani, to you, also to Nozipho, as well as Khomotso. Thank you so much for coming and sharing. And again, And if we couldn't respond online, unfortunately, because of our challenges this afternoon, but we will make an effort to respond to those questions that have been posed online. So thank you so much. Thank you.
You?
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Gerald Gerveling, for that very interesting discussion. I'm sure it has drawn quite a lot of interest, seeing from our platform medias, social media, as well as on the app. We see there's quite a engagement and discussion flowing from there. But obviously, due to the challenges that we have been faced with, and as we've already identified that in one of our earlier sessions with Mr. Sibanda, some of the issues that we are posing challenges to the fourth industrial revolution. When we talk of the changing world of work, we need to now factor in instances such as these, where we have moments where we have load shedding, and it then affects our, being it whether it's your work or whether it's a seminar or anything that you may be currently busy with, and then interrupts the, being it the service or whatever it is that you need to be engaging upon. So we do sincerely apologize for that inconvenience, and we appreciate that you continue to keep on logging and continued with the discussion. While we proceed with the compliance in terms of the COVID-19 regulations, in terms of sanitizing the area, I just want to go back to some of our partners that I may not have mentioned and just give some acknowledgement. And that we'll be talking about partners such as IOKITA's Consultants, the Department of Employment and Labor, the Commission for Gender Equality, DIM Industrial Relations Solutions, and also referring back to our key sponsor, the National Fund for Municipal Workers. Now we move on to our next session. With the sanitization done, can you just confirm while you're busy? I'll just introduce our next session, which is the fourth session for the day, under the sub-theme Perspective on the Efficacy of Municipalities with regard to policy, employee welfare, and current jurisprudence. I'm going to ask our moderator, Ms. Tabia Kabinde, who is the chairperson for the Commission for Employment Equity, who is currently the managing director of We Find Talent, which is a recruitment agency in Pretoria. And she is, amongst some of the roles that she had been tasked with, as his presidency in the APSO that happened in 2011, as well as her active role in the BUSA and NETLEC engagements. So with that, can we just welcome Ms. Tabia Kabinde, who will then introduce the panel that will come on board for our next panel discussion. Please keep your feedback, your inputs, and your questions. Submit them. We'll find ways in which we can respond to them, being it online or at the later stage. Thank you. Ms. Kabinde?
Good afternoon, everyone, and it's a great pleasure for us to be here and to share this time with you in this conference, as has already been introduced by a particular focus on the workplace. I'm going to introduce my panel, which will be in discussion with me this afternoon. First, let me introduce Mr. Mbuyiselo Puota, a colleague and a friend. Through his advocacy work, Mbuyiselo has been featured in hundreds of newspapers, radios, and televisions, and he's hosted weekly talk shows on radio stations as well, and has participated on international platforms. He was singled out by ex-President Thabo Mbeki for being one of the major contributors to work done with men on gender equality in South Africa. In 2014, he was appointed as a part-time commissioner to the Commission of Gender Equality, and he serves on a number of boards. Extremely passionate on the subject of gender equality, and we will engage him today on the topic that I've already shared. We also have Ms. Kubi Rama, who is supposed to be connecting with us virtually. She has 25 years of experience in NGOs and in institutions of higher learning, and her contribution has been in the space of gender equality. And one of her major achievements is growing the organization called Gender Links from a staff complement of 4 to over 60 people with 10 offices throughout the country. She's currently the CEO of Gender Links. And then finally, Naledi Masipa. Naledi started as a teacher. And as we were talking during our lunchtime, I discovered that she actually taught at a high school that I went to. In 2002, she joined the Department of Public Works in the as a human resources officer. 2005, she joined the Capricorn District Municipality as a gender coordinator and has recently retired. I'm so envious of her. Due to her broad knowledge in gender-related matters, she's been consulting with a number of organizations. She has great passion for healing people and for dealing with trauma and stress experienced particularly by children, adults, and families. And ladies and gentlemen, that is my panel. So our topic is really about unpacking gender-based violence with particular reference to the workplace. So we will try and restrict ourselves to this particular area. Gender-based violence has been said in one of the labor appeal court that it is one of the most heinous misconducts that plagues the workplace, and I believe it is so. To put it simply, vulnerable groups, especially women, live in fear and are afraid. We are afraid to walk in our neighborhood. We are afraid to exercise alone. We're afraid to take public transport. We're afraid to express our view in social media and to speak out against injustice wherever it takes place. And we are generally just afraid because we seem to be prey to those attackers. With the lockdown, in the first week, 2,300 cases of GBV were reported. And in a survey in July, we found that there was an increase of GBV of 54% throughout all the provinces. It is further said that whilst in 2019-2020, there were 116 rape cases per day, this has increased to about 146 cases per day. And just as I close, I want to just allude to the fact that actually the issue of GBV is a matter of power. And I think we should never forget that. It's an act of power. Therefore, the issue of gender-based violence in the workplace becomes a critical issue to talk about, because there is nothing as empowering for a woman or anybody who's vulnerable as being able to be economically active and to provide for yourself. So when we go to the workplace and we find that this pandemic continues, it just makes it more difficult for women to continue to be economically active and to be able to make difficult decisions, such as leaving relationships that are oppressive to them. I don't even want to go in and talk about the whole issue of how the pandemic COVID-19 has impacted on gender-based violence. I think I've shared a bit of the statistics, and we all know how difficult it has been for vulnerable groups, especially women. So I'm going to allow my panelists. We're going to start with Kubi, who is joining with us virtually, and I'm going to give her an opportunity to just quickly give her opening remarks, and then after that, we will allow my two panelists that are with me here to do same. Kubi, over to you. Kubi, you're muted. Can you unmute, please?
Good afternoon, everyone. How are you? Sorry that I couldn't join you. I was in a meeting just before this and wouldn't have had enough time to rush over there. So a virtual meeting. I'm afraid these are the days of our lives in COVID. The question of GBV in the workplace is an interesting one because I think it's multifaceted and has so many different dimensions. There is GBV in the workplace that is really, I think that is indicative of other inequalities in the workplace. You know, we always speak about in South Africa the enabling environment. And I think for as long as we have an environment where women and men do not earn the same for doing similar jobs, and women and men are not equally represented at all levels of decision making in the workplace at different levels of employment, then GBV will be highly prevalent because it's indicative of the inequality that is evident at every level within the workplace. I think the other very important thing is, of all the forms of GBV, one of the most hidden and insidious is sexual harassment because it is so difficult to prove. The burden of proof becomes a real power game, he said, she said, and very difficult to prove. And I think in labor courts, it's become quite an issue because what is the body of evidence? I think in addition to the GBV in the workplace, a real issue for employers is how the GBV that women are experiencing in their personal spaces actually then impacts on the workplace. So it's one of those areas where it is very clear the personal is not private. The personal experience that women face is very much about what happens in the workplace, what happens in every other public space. And it's something we have to talk about, or workplaces will not be addressing GBV very effectively.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Kubi, for your opening comments. I'm now going to hand over to Naledi. Naledi, can you give us your opening comments on the subject?
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for the opportunity. As we have already said, that gender-based violence at the workplace is a very crucial matter. Kubi talked about sexual harassment. I want to go to a very, very sensitive one that I always get worried about. I call it trafficking at the workplace, where you find that all the time you are given an opportunity to go and attend the trainings, only to find that wherever you are, you're going to be a sex slave because the supervisor or your principal is always electing you to go and attend to that particular training with a hidden agenda that he knows that you're going to be his sex slave. And another one that is very crucial as well is let me pull it out. It's stalking. Stalking in the sense of saying you are requested to go and attend a meeting, but when you are there at the meeting, they'll keep on calling you just to make sure you are at the meeting. That is very painful. And to also ask your colleagues to check if Naledi was really there at that particular meeting, or even to deny your trip authorization because they don't have a witness that you are at that particular meeting. And to me, that one is very, 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 very painful. And the other thing is humiliation in meetings, where you find that you are not heard at all. In fact, you are suppressed. When you want to make some input, you're not given given times. And that one, it definitely humiliate you. Or they will just say to you, those things are outdated. We don't use that anymore in front of everyone. That is very much humiliating. The other one is discrimination in terms of allowing you to go for trips, whereas SARS is after you. Where you find that you need to go for a trip, they don't sign your trip authorization. You need to claim for the trip that you're undergone. They don't sign your claims. In that regard, how do you feel as a person? How do you feel as a woman? So this one is very, very, very painful because it is also going to affect your tax returns. And the last one is sexual coercion. We know what is happening is more or less like the sexual harassment. But some other things are done under pressure because you want to prove that at least you can do something. This is where you come, where the sexual activities is dealt to you unwantedly so. And I think I can stop here. Oh, the other one that I shouldn't forget is the social exclusion. We have bursaries at the workplace. We have trainings that we need to attend to at the workplace. But you find that you are always excluded. When you filled in the skills development form, but you are always excluded for the whole year. And then when you have a bursary, they will tell you to motivate. And when you motivate, they will tell you the motivation is not valued enough. Even if you ask them to, okay, help me, how can I make it to have a weight? How can I make it valued? You are not helped. Then you are excluded in those bursaries. That's another burning issue that is always happening at the workplace. Patriarchy as well is still there. You ask a question that is disrespectful. So you better keep quiet so that to avoid to be pinpointed to say you are very much disrespectful. I think I can stop there, though it is too much that we can talk about gender-based violence.
Thank you very much. I'm going to allow Ntate Mbuyiselo to share his initial thoughts.
Thank you, May. I thank you so much, but also I want to thank Salga for creating this opportunity for us. Here's the sad part. We're talking about, GBV in the workplace, but we know that the unfortunate thing is that the home became the workplace. When we talk about the new normal, now in your opening, it was for me poignant when you talk about anywhere and everywhere where women go, they in fact remain vulnerable or remain a targeted species. Now, one would have assumed that the home would become a secure environment. Now, the figures that you spoke about, the first few months of our lockdown, the numbers were skyrocketing, which meant therefore that when we talk about GBV, when we talk about sexual harassment, it does not stop. One would say, or one would argue that the levels of sexual harassment would not decrease by virtue of us being locked down. Now, in fact, what happened was that violence, we saw GBV escalating at home. And what was said was that the survivors, women in the main, would not be able to escape because this is your home. This is your place where you are supposed to be secured. But in fact, you are under attack. So, and you are not able, one, to call for an assistance because then you're not able to, in most cases, your rural areas, there would be underdeveloped areas, there would be no cell phones. If there are cell phones, police would also be either overwhelmed or the system would also fail police or would fail women, in fact, which means police would either not be interested to respond in time. But for me, and for us as the Commission for Gender Equality, what was said was that, your shelter, where women would go in numbers, they are not properly, adequately, funded. So you would ask yourself a question: where would women go to? You are in a structural building. You are in the workplace, at the Salga offices, you are harassed sexually. Now, one would think that if you are at your home, at your home, one would expect that look, you are safe there, it's a secured, security and comfort, but in fact the opposite is true. But what is also, what COVID-19 did for us, it sharpened or it highlighted, these inequalities. We knew of them, but little did we know that, we know about domestic violence. There are studies, there are statistics, but little did we know that when in fact couples are there, whether in same-sex relationships, couples, when they're home, then the levels of violence will increase. Because you know why? Because societies that, Naredi spoke about patriarchy, which I think is, in fact, the elephant in the room. There are these programs that will do all of us as individuals. If I'm the husband, from work, I'll go global namajita, or I'll go to a gym, I'll go to all of these, areas of where I would not be able to sit now for 24 hours with this individual. Now, there are these simmering, underlying, violent or underlying misunderstandings that have always been there. And suddenly we are here. Here's a person that you don't know how to deal with, because none of us, especially as men, you have not been skilled, trained to communicate. Now, you suddenly see yourself in this space with someone, and there's something that has happened a while back. You want to raise it now. Equally true, and we know that there's a saying that women have got the gift of the gab. Now, you are in this closed, supposed to be secured space. Now, suddenly the issues that she had always wanted to raise had not had the platform to raise. Now, here's this individual. We are not going anywhere. Here are these kids that are here. Now, suddenly I must raise these things. But again, because I'm not skilled to deal with disagreement as a man, I'm not skilled, or I have no tools to deal with equality. Now, suddenly I am confronted. She's asking me that, can you cook? She's asking me that, can you tender to the children? Things that patriarchy has always discouraged me from doing. What do? I resort to that which I know best. That, I will shut you up. I will. So the sad thing is that, and I wish that Salga, and as an employer, would have been able to even support some of these institutions. I mentioned to you about shelters. Imagine what would happen if different municipalities that we have in our country, if each one of them have been able to adopt one shelter and say that we will, as part of our corporate responsibility, will ensure that this shelter is well resourced, both capital and human, that there are enough social workers, that there are mothers, that the place is habitable. The sad thing is that even structurally, that you are in a situation where places where women, you would think they would run to, they are not able to go there because of the lockdown. But also, if they go in there, the places are run down, the places are not well looked after. And it is NGOs who are doing amazing work under difficult circumstances. If you go to our website and look at a report from the Commission for Gender Equality on the status or state of shelter in South Africa, it is in fact depressing. I will stop there. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So let's start talking about the issue that what the C-19 did is that it pushed workers to work from home. And with that, it opened a can of worms of people feeling trapped in their homes, people feeling that they cannot move anywhere. Now, as an employer, what are some of your thoughts about how employers should prepare their environment, or what assistance they should offer to their employees? Because suddenly the home has become a workspace. So where does one draw the line? Where does the responsibility of the employer begin and end in that regard? Kubi, do you want to start with that? Kubi.
Hi, I think it's a very important question, and it relates not just to COVID-19, but indeed, the high levels of GBV that we experience in our country. So I think one of the things that started to happen with COVID-19 was there were all sorts of, I think all of us would have seen it on Facebook, that if you're in trouble, send me this kind of message or that kind of message, and I'll know you're in trouble. So I think the whole point around early warning systems. So if you are experiencing some kind of conflict in your home and you need assistance, I think employees have to consider, what can an employee do? How can an employee let us know? Particularly if you're working from home, it implies you have some level of access to the internet, to social media. So how can we assist? You know, the whole notion that there's GBV in your home and GBV in the workplace is a little bit of a myth, because we know GBV runs across all sectors, all contexts, and that whether it happens in the home or in the workplace, it affects all aspects of your life. So I think there's something around early warning systems, how we can help if we, you know, what is it a woman is telling us if they send a particular type of message. I think Mbuyiselo made reference to some people not even having access to cell phones and data, etc., which is a massive problem. We've seen it, cell phones get taken away, communication is monitored, but I think there's a way of managing that. And we need to become a lot more aware of how we can assist. You know, is there a way an employee can let us know that there's a problem in the home? And what kind of intervention should we be seeking? Should we be calling the police? Do we have to maybe say that particular employee has to come to work as a way of getting them out of a particular situation? So the whole notion of warning systems, you know, within the workplace when people are working at home.
Thank you. So the other issue that became prevalent was the issue of cyberbullying. So Naledi spoke about different types of bullying that happen in the workplace, where you find that people are humiliated in meetings, people are coerced into certain behavior, and how patriarchy plays itself out in the workplace. But now, with us working remotely, there was more of an increase in issues such as cyberbullying. Can any of you share some of the experiences and also share how, with employers, employees, what are some of the tactics that they can use to deal with it? Do you want to start, Naledi?
Yes, I think the most important thing, or the gap that I see, our employees are not taught to speak up. Even if they're in a certain corner, like they experience violence from home, they experience violence from work, it's not like everybody would know until maybe someone is sick. Then when you take that particular person to the doctor, they will tell you, if I happen to accompany you, they will tell you, this one is having a depression. Is then that when you sit at a corner, try to find out what is the root of the matter, is then that you will hear all these stories. I've been with this person for almost 80% of our lives at work. I don't know of these things. I still remember there was this lady who was wearing 1 2-piece all the time. And then one day, he said to me, they used to have a kumbi that is taking them to town because they did not have cars. So one day, she was promised a lift, and then the lift did not, that person who was supposed to give her a lift did not go. But I felt pity for her. And then I was forced to go to town so that I can accompany her, because I know if it wouldn't have that time, we wouldn't go to town anymore. Then I went with her. Then on the way, I asked, why are you always in this 2-piece? And you have such a good body, but you don't buy yourself some clothes. What is the problem? That is when I had most terrible things that I never had in my life. That the husband is taking the cut every month. The car that is the husband is driving, it's her money. And I could not believe it. But if I wasn't have time to ask her, the problem is they don't talk. Even if we go around with the awareness campaigns, people don't talk. And it's difficult to help someone who don't talk. We have got EAPs at home, at workplace. They don't utilize that. We have occupational health and safety. They don't utilize that. So how will the employer help? It's a very big a mountain of an issue for everyone. I don't know. I can stop there, but
Yeah.
that's what I want to say.
I think,
Yeah,
yeah,
Chair,
I think,
please go
mate,
ahead.
I think it's important that there must be consequences. I mean, employees know that they can get away with it literally with a lot of things. Now, but secondly, and more important for me, is that if I know that there's a particular code of conduct, I mean, relating to, I mean, cyber, or relating to, I mean, working from home, if I know that there is a slightest chance that I have in fact crossed the line, and I know the line, that I mean, if I know that there are consequences, the likelihood is that I would abide by the code of conduct. Now, I think I'm sitting here and I ask myself, now let us raise the issue of EAPs. I mean, are they, I mean, we're at home. I mean, do people have access to them? But I want to say, and the context for me is that when we are with Salga, for me, the context is that with Salga is, in fact, I mean, there should have been ways to ensure that, I mean, communities, because ultimately, Salga is one organ of state that, in fact, is at the cold phase of inequalities or of communities of violence. So there should have been preparedness that, I mean, the neighborliness that I know when I mean, I remember many years ago, councillors used to have, I mean, council committees. If these were well structured and communities know that, look, I am my brother's keeper, if you like. Possibilities are that people are going to raise their voices. People are going to be able to be brave and to know that, look, I may not be able to go out, but I know that my neighbor, there are these systems in place that would make sure that people know in my neighborhood that all is not well in my household.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I think one of the things that you talk about is, and could we refer to it, enabling environments. That part of the problem is that most environments are very enabling. We do know that that particular manager is a sex predator, but nobody will speak up and nothing will be done. And in some cases, I'm thinking of a case that was in the media for a while, where even the CEO knew that a particular departmental head was a sex predator, but continued to allow this person to operate in the environment without consequence, which you refer to. So what are employers supposed to do? What can we recommend to employers? What are some of the things that we could recommend from your experience in this field for Salga, for example, to look at implementing as ways of creating an environment that is not enabling, and where, as employers, the municipalities are seen as caring employers? Kubi, do you want to take that one first?
Yeah, Sister Lady, I was listening to you and I can hear, we've worked together for a long time, both Mbuyiselo, Sister Lady, myself. I think, they don't want to speak. It's actually not they. It's all of us. Women generally in the workplace don't speak, and not necessarily because you're afraid. I think this, we have wonderful policies and we have zero tolerance, but everyone would have read the story about Andy Kawa and the 10 years it took, for her rape case to be addressed. 10 years. And as, the environment, it's about changing how we do these things. Justice must be seen to be delivered in the workplace as everywhere else. So a case of sexual harassment mustn't be pushed under the carpet. And it's very difficult. I mean, how many, when women don't want to speak, how many women come, because it's seen to be something that is private, that nobody should know about. The churches say, stay with your husband because, or your partner, because that's what God said. I don't think God speaks to anyone directly, but, You know, we often quoting God or Jesus or, you know, Allah or whoever it might be, the Hindu gods. God speaks to us and says, stay with your partner. You know, we must stop speaking about patriarchy as if it's never going to go away. We make it this thing in our lives that is all powerful. It is not all powerful. We fought against apartheid, we can break down patriarchy. In fact, not we can, we have to. Because the cost is too high if we don't. So justice must be seen in workplace. If we know how people are behaving, it is everyone's duty to ensure that sexual harassment, when it happens, is addressed. And if it's not addressed, then the CEO must also be fired.
Well, Tabia,
That's right.
Tabia, I wanted to say that Salga must, in fact, you know, look, where I am from the Commission for Gender Equality, there's been disturbing cases. There's also been disturbing cases, but also the rate with which these cases are handled, it is in fact dismal. It is disappointing. So if we say that, if we say the structures must be created, but these structures must be seen to be biting. It's all very well to have laws, that are getting dust. It's all very well to have a sexual harassment policy. That should not stop there. That's not enough. Because look, what most companies do, and you know with your kind of work that you do in Metabia, that you would have a situation where companies would actually even set aside a ring-fence money if they're found wanting. Now Salga must in fact walk the talk. Salga must ensure that women in their employment or women in the communities that they serve, Salga must make sure that women have the confidence that, look, if I go with a sexual harassment matter to Salga, the leadership employer would take me serious. They would not only pay lip service, they would act on it. Now, it's that type of confidence. For as long as women don't have confidence to approach the authorities, chances are that their cases would actually not even be seen. There are instances where from the Commission for Gender Equality would have investigative hearings. You would ask an employer, tell me, how many cases have you had sexual harassment? In a big organization, they will tell you that, oh, no, we only had one case in 5 years. But for me, they are not introspective and say, but where does the fault? Is it do women are not getting sexual harassed? And the reality is that's not true. Yes. But for them, it's an indication that we are doing well. As a result, there's this pat in the back. When in fact, Salga and other employers have got to ask themselves, is it because women are not reporting, or is it because women don't have confidence in the system? As a result, they ask themselves, what's the point? It's like women who don't report rape. Recently now, you read in the paper, two DJs, their cases were withdrawn. Yeah. And it doesn't necessarily mean that rape did not happen. You see what I'm saying? It doesn't mean, but it's because women more often than not, they know that the system continuously, consciously, without fail, fails them.
Yeah, that's right. I want to move on to a new point, a different point. And it's the issue of C190. And some of the definitions that have changed. So C190 now says, and in the draft code on the prevention and elimination of violence and harassment in the world of work, the definition of workplace has changed. Now we talk about the world of work. And this is precisely because at times the violations do not necessarily happen inside the office. And Naledi, you spoke about the fact of sex slaves, where certain people are taken to workshops, to conferences, not because there's much input that they're going to make in terms of the content, but because the powers that be are abusing their power and misusing it to violate some of their employees. Now, what are your thoughts about the new definition, which I know that for some employers is very problematic? The way it is defined, the world of work now includes being at conferences and at bosperads. The world of work includes transportation of people to and from work, because we know in the retail industry, people knock off at 9 o'clock and employers don't care how people get home. What are your thoughts on this redefinition? Naledi, let's start with you.
I know awareness has been going on about all these issues. I think the best thing is for our employers to go back to the drawing board. Where did we go wrong? Why is, like as my brother said, cases are not reported? Is it that we are doing good or what? How can we come up with mechanism of preventing? And unfortunately, they will never know how to prevent if they don't get into deeper of the issue. Is it happening or not? I think it's high time that they must do a survey. Let's just have a dialogue of your employees, not with any particular topic. I like the South African women in dialogue because they don't give some people some topics. You just talk. And when we talk, we'll be able to dig out some problems, and then we'll be able to know how to prevent whatever that people have been talking about. That's what I think.
Sure. Kubi, any thoughts about the world of work as opposed to workplace?
I completely agree that it had to be broadened. And here I'm probably going to get flack, but that's okay. I think that in addition to Salga and workplaces and the world of work and conferences, there are two other types of conferences that are notorious for sexual harassment and all sorts of sexual assault. Trade union conferences, political party conventions. And the reason why I'm raising that is because I think it's if it's acceptable in a particular type of scenario, then people think, oh, okay, then, it's the way one can behave and get away with it. So it's absolutely necessary for us to address it in all the different spaces where it may or may not occur. And yes, it is about the world of work. Because and this relates particularly to Salga, if a woman works late and then gets dropped off at a particular space, wherever she may live, and if the municipality hasn't provided sufficient street lighting, for example, and it's dark and the grass is not cut, that immediately increases the risk to the person's safety. So the issue of local government is so important on so many different levels, and service delivery linked to that. So I think the world of work is a very important, conceptually incredibly important, because you're absolutely right. Women do not get harassed and abused within the workplace only.
Sure. Can we just share some practical advice, practical suggestions?
Tabia, before we even go there, the sad thing is that the C90 we're talking about, our government has not ratified. Now, which means that it can't be domesticated. That's where the problem is. And look, I think it's important, Salga. It's important for us to say today that Minister of Labor, Minister Tula Singesi, it's important, and the government and those, Kusatu is in alliance with the ruling party. It's important for us to say today, this afternoon, that why the delay? Why is it that we are not able to see this piece of legislation that is domesticated? Why is it that the country has not been able to accede to it, has not been able to sign it? That for me, it's important, it's critical, because then what it means, therefore, is that it makes it mandatory that this is the law of the country. So it's important for us to call and say, Kusatu or trade union movement put pressure to bear to ensure that C190 is signed, it's made into law, is domesticated, so that you don't have, look, you see, the difficulty is that GBV, femicide, sexual harassment are treated as non-issues. Because, and we have not been able as a country to make the connection between GBV, femicide, sexual harassment, and the economy. As a result, look at the KPMG's report. As a result, as a country, the majority of us, we have not been able to see that there is a direct link and correlation when women are battered, to our economy. That, hospitals get overburdened. money that's supposed to go to other services are not going there primarily because we have to address issues of GBV. So I'm just saying that it's important, Tabia, as we speak, that Salga, I mean, as an institution, puts pressure to pay, I mean, to comrades, to colleagues, that let's sign this and make it effective.
Sure. I need to protect the department and the minister to say that though the process of ratification may be taking time, the draft code itself has incorporated C190 and it's out there in the public space. And we are hoping that quite soon, you know, it will become a policy tool that all employers can use. And it has incorporated a lot of the elements that are in C190. And one of those, which is for me quite a critical element, is the issue of employers not being exonerated of their responsibilities. That once a matter has been brought to the fore of sexual harassment or any form of harassment or violence, the employer has an absolute responsibility to do something about it. And if they don't, then they are just as responsible. And I think those are steps that are quite progressive and that employers need to take into consideration. And yes, Salga needs to note that as well, to note that if employees are complaining and nothing's been done, then the employer is also responsible. I'm looking at our time. We don't have much time, but as we wrap up, one issue that is also in the code is the whole issue of domestic violence and how employers have a role to play in domestic violence. You touched upon it to say that GBV has an impact on productivity. And that is why it becomes important for employers to offer help to employees who are experiencing domestic violence. It can even be as far as to advise them on the different channels and resources that are available. What are your thoughts on that? Because we've received, there's a lot of pushback from employers who are saying that this goes beyond their scope of responsibility. Kubi, do you want to talk to that? And then I'll allow the two panelists to also talk to that as we begin to conclude.
Two things. I think, one of the things we have to get working is a sexual offenders register. And anyone who is found guilty of sexual harassment should be put on that register and should be put on their records. Because I think it's very important for employers to know if somebody has been found guilty of it. It's a crime. So in the same way we have a registry for other things, we need to put sexual discrimination on there. I think the employers are extremely short-sighted if they look at gender-based or domestic violence as a private matter that's beyond their scope. Ultimately, domestic violence impacts on productivity. And if you are a business, a lower level of productivity impacts on your profit or income or whatever, however you configure yourself. So you have a very important vested interest in addressing it because you want your employees to work at their best, at the optimum level. And if they're experiencing gender-based violence, any form of violence, they won't. And I think the KPMG report illustrated that very vividly for all of us. As a country, we lose so many days due to, we don't always know, but, injuries, people having to take time off because they have to seek medical attention, etc. So it is in every employer's interest to have very serious strategies to deal with GBV in the workplace and in the home.
Thank you. I think we're running out of time, so I'm going to ask that we wrap up. Last comments from, let's start with Mbuyiselo, then we'll come to Naledi, and then conclude with you, Kubi.
Well, I think that that COVID-19, the setting, as I said, has actually shown, the gaps, how wide they are. And in fact, it has shown to the country that we should have done certain things 20 years ago. Sure. It caught us all napping, but unfortunately, it actually exacerbated. What you already knew. When the president of the country, President Ramaphosa, talks about the second pandemic, yes. It's so true. In fact, unfortunately, all it did was to highlight. So we have a responsibility, all of us. And I think, as I said earlier, Salga is well positioned, set in that it may be dealing with also lack of resources where they're operating from themselves because of a number of political issues in the country. It's important that Salga gets strengthened, but also when you talk about GBV and femicide and sexual harassment, I think for me, Salga has to see to it that when their employees, because they're also employers, Salga, when their employees are hurting, I mean, these also deals, I mean, demoralizes people, but also it deals a dent to their image. So when there are cases that gets reported to them, Salga must be seen to act and act decisively.
Salga must act and act decisively. Naledi, you've got 30 seconds.
Okay, on a closing note, I'm encouraging safety planning, which is victim-centered approach. So I think, as Sister Kubi was saying, enabling environment. So when you make it a point that you put a planning that is very safe for all the employees, I think that will also work. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Kubi, your last comments.
I think I said it during one of my contributions. I don't think we can address gender-based violence. I think we must address gender-based violence. And Mbuyiselo and Sis Naledi made reference to the fact that the policies are in place, the laws are in place. We have fantastic, policy frameworks. We have to make them start working. And that means we need to create safe environments in the workplace where women can speak out and not be afraid of intimidation.
Thank you very much. We're hearing that policies exist. It's the implementation that's a problem. It's something that I've heard over and over again through this panel. I'd like to